Okay, in this episode of Power Tools on the Fly, or working with Power Tools for Urban Terror HD, I'm going to cover some of the ideas that we have in the mix for our future player models that we'll be introducing for Urban Terror HD. And one of the basic ideas that we have working on is the concept of unique player identification. Now, Blade Killer is actually working on some rather interesting ideas and concept in that area. So I'm going to leave that as for her to discuss in any kind of blogs. That's her slice of the pie, her cookie, so to speak. But we'll give you kind of an update, an idea of what to expect as far as player model development goes for Urban Terror HD. And to kind of set things up, obviously in 4.2 we have just the basic two models. We have the male model and the female model. This kind of makes it a bit difficult to identify a given character, a player model, the enemy, so to speak, based on silhouetting, which is a usual technique. It's a human reaction to as part of identification. You don't need to see everything. You don't need to see if they're red. You don't need to see if they're blue because you can identify the enemy long before that based on the silhouetting of the character. Like you have these monster type games, shooters. You know who the bad guy is. You can see the shape and form dictates that this is the target you shoot at. So unfortunately, with 4.2, player visibility suffers from in part by having just two base player models that you can't really identify, even though we call one, for example, Tom, or the or we're referring to Sarah, uh, or any other given name that the player model is still. They're still basically the same shape and form, just different paint jobs put onto it. So ideally, what we want to do is create sex. In other words, a player on one team is not going to be a player available to another team. So sector-wise, blue player model that's predominantly a sect blue will always be on blue team. A player model that is sect red will always be on red team. So you're not going to have, for example, a Sarah that's going to be on red and blue, or a Tom that's going to be on blue and red. They're going to be separated from one another. So if you want to play, you have a favorite particular player model that you like to play with, then obviously the sect that you play on is going to determine which player models you can have access to. So we feel that this is going to help out a lot in the area of making it easier to identify player models beyond trying to up the the glowiness of the players. Kind of make them sort of neon kind of idea that that 4.2 seems to press towards as we try to improve player visibility through ramping up color tones and so forth to the point that people are joke about orange jumpsuits and that kind of thing. So we kind of like to avoid that and start working towards individuality of the different, adding a player model identity. Now, to be able to achieve that, we do need a lot of more player models. Conceptually, 5 years from now, I'd like to see a virtual unlimited number of different types of characters an individual can play, be it that they can either play with something that we've prefabricated, or the trend is also for more generalized customization on the part of the player, where they can select the shape, form, and overall. So that's kind of the semi direction that we're heading towards as a long-term ideal, as opposed to just throwing player models out there and this is what you get, this is what you land up, whether you play with it or not. So to be able to achieve that, we need a high degree of flexibility as part of the part of the forward thinking of the player model design pathways of what tools do we have access to, what features in Unreal 4 that allows for that kind of level of flexibility. And to sort of get things started, we're going to start with a base, so to speak, as in if it works with this, it'll work with anything kind of idea. And even though we have a lot of flexibility built into the design, as into individual desires, like somebody wants to make their own character model, unique in design, from whatever it is that we can supply, as long as they're able to fit within our current framework, our current player model structuring, then it's not going to be a problem at all for them to be able to go off on their own and be able to make their own player models if they wish. But for a while, we need to be a little bit more restrictive as to volume of space that, let's say, a player model takes up. You know, as in all our player models will be for a while 6 feet tall. To at least to use that as a base to establish things like controllability over the hit mesh design, you know, be able to get in, to root in the type of animation and movement systems that we need, the set up retargeting system, so that if we decide later on if we want to go bigger or smaller as part of our player model design, that's available to us as well. And this all has to be kind of feathered out as part of the design process. So we will have obviously some really nice functional player models to from square one. So let's kind of think of HD version 1 as kind of trying to establish a parity with the current 4.2 as to the playability of the game. And then once we've have that stabilized, then we can kind of look towards future design objectives based on things like player feedback and so forth. You know, players like to have things done, obviously, to their taste and so forth, and we don't really have an objection to be able to accomplish that. You know, it's a lot of fun to be able to make something that the players want to play with, versus trying to invent a whole new idea behind a game that's already been, you know, that's well established. You know, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, but rather to move forward and make things more better. Not just because they need because there's the need to want to make it look better. So anyways, the chit-chat side, the fireside chit-chat being over with, let's get on to what we have in mind here. This is, I finally got this back from Blade Killer. She's a really good UV mapper, excellent modeler as well, and I did the remodel. As you can see, this is it got some interesting looping and shape and form. And the our base model, we refer to this as our sock puppet, or sock model. In other words, this is what slides over the framework of our player model to be able to build different types of player models. And as you can see, we're under 8K. We start adding things in like eyelashes and so forth. I think that brings that up to just a little over 8K. So very low poly by today's standards, considering this gives us a lot of room. We figured that, you know, maybe a budget of about at one end, say 15K. You know, our testing in under FS Tech 1 shows that a 15K model has very little impact as to playability and so forth. So Unreal 4 has a lot more optimization techniques available to it. So we can certainly bring in our character models with some shape, form, and design and flavor within reasonable limits. Being a sock, though, this is allows us to connect this to our base to the Genesis model. Now, if you're not familiar with Genus, let me isolate this. If you're not familiar with Genus, Genesis is a Daz Studio product, or Daz 3D product, that can be licensed, which is what we're going to be doing. And based on that license, you can use it to extract various different shapes and forms within Within let's say a usability within the defines of a particular licensing. So depending on what you're doing, the licensing is scaled from as low as say $500 up to about $2,500, depending on what it is. So we kind of, based on our needs, we find kind of fall into the $500 category. So it's well within our budget to be able to afford to introduce procedural generated player models into our pipeline. Now this design of this player pipeline is flexible enough that the sock, let's go back to the sock I guess, and we'll hide our Genesis model again. That our sock, no, I still have the nail selected. It's been a hot day today. I need to turn on the air conditioning, but if I turn on the air conditioning, then you hear it. Now our sock here is androgynous. I guess the word is. It's either male or female. It's neither particular to any kind of given sex or whatever. But it can conform it does conform, as you saw, to the Genesis model. Now, let's go back to the Genesis again. Okay. Now the thing about the Genesis as a procedural character is you can extract different types of morph targets. Data Studio allows you to almost make virtually any type of character that you wish. And as you can see here, I already have just a few body shapes that are introduced into this character, injected into this character as a target. So based on the total number of different type of targets you have, they become multiples because they're additive. You know, you have a 5% of this, 10% of that, a little bit of this, and a little bit of that, and you can create different unique player bases. So let's say, for example, I should have mentioned that there is a nudity involved here from the start. But hey, this is art, and if polygon nudity kind of makes you blush, then oh well. Anyways, as you can see, I have a female base that this conforms to the Genesis female body form as the stock item. So if we select that back to 0, we have another shape here. You know, this is a male form. That's a heavy. So you know, we have now a different unique player model. Now they all kind of generally look the same because of texturing. Texturing definitely plays a big difference between from one character to the other. But they all kind of look like they're all related to the same family. So we go to heavy. We have that available to us. We have the female bodybuilder that's more, you know, it's more definable muscular shape and form. Still looks like a guy though with the texture. Yeah. Oh well. But what we can do is, as well, is we can introduce like other different types of characters, like for example zombies. Now this is an interesting type of approach in that a single frame can support many different types of forms and shapes as an additive injection. In other words, we don't have to have just one zombie. We can create a clamped variable driven setup where, depending on the total number of different shapes and forms, we can create unique different forms and shapes in numbers. So for example, we add just a little bit of the female base, and we add just a little bit of the heavy, and we add a little bit of the female zombie shape. You can see all of a sudden we start getting different forms and shapes based on the same chassis. So this one character, it can be driven by just one set of animations. It has the same UV mapping systems and so forth. And you know, Unreal 4 will be more than happy to accept any kind of targeting information we want to send over to it, and then we can just create a clamped random generator to generate as many different types of unique characters as we want. But directly going back to being able to generate the actual geometry and mesh within the game. I mean, this isn't bad. This is 42K, but you don't want to hold, you know, it's what could be the hero model, so to speak. You know, we can reserve, say, slot 1 for high definition, highly detailed player models. You know, you can see every crack and crevice and pore. And then the LOD version, of course, would be the actual playing version of the model. So we can add certainly add a slice of the pie for both sides. Performance for those who are into the competitive gaming scene, and eye candy for those who kind of like that stuff. Me personally, I do like eye candy, so I'm somewhat motivated to work in that direction. But anyways, let's get back on track here. Back to our base player model. Okay, so let's kind of isolate him for a second. And as you can see, as we mentioned, we're under 8K, so it makes a desirable model. But we need to be able to inject different forms and shapes into this player model. So we can just do an unhide. I have my base model selected, and we can use the power and flexibility of the modifier by gluing our base model, in this case using a skin wrap, to the high poly version model. So we can just do an add, and we're going to select that. And it does take a couple of seconds for it to show up into the modifier panel here. So this would probably make a good time to have commercials, I guess. Well, not really. Okay, so anyways, you can see that we are now skin wrapped to our base model, base male. It's always a good idea. You have to turn this off manually. I've made a mistake more than once to, clicking on stuff and it all of a sudden shows up into our add skin modifier. But you can now see that our base is now wrapped to our alpha generator, so to speak. And what we can do from here is go ahead, and I'm going to select the object properties and just set this up as a box so we can just sort of see this overlaid on top of it, and we can see how this is kind of injecting into our player model. This is the this is what you'll be playing. Of course, nicer textures. This is just to kind of cover up the nudity, but unfortunately we didn't get away with it, did we? So anyways, there's our female base. Once again, kind of androgynous until we start getting into some of the fancy texturing that is now available to us. We got a big beefy guy, we got the heavy, so you can kind of see that it's taking shape and form. Still kind of androgynous. Now it actually kind of looks female, I guess, because it got man boobs. Okay, we go to our zombie, and we can do our mixing too as well, as we were talking about. Oh, look at that. We got, let's push that a little bit more. We got like a really tough zombie, and a little bit too heavy, so to speak. So a lot of flexibility, as you can see, with just a handful of targets. So once we get to start moving into the pipeline, then it's going to all become about texture work. So that's going to be a lot of work for somebody down the road. Anyways, to kind of finish things off, how do we get this this guy? Once we get it down to this our base sock model, how do we get this out? So for example, let's go back to the morpher. Let's say, for example, we want our zombie. You can never have enough zombies. Oops. Oh, okay. That is not a zombie. That is a zombie. Okay, so say for example we have our zombie here, and it's skin wrapped. We want to be able to transfer this information over to our current character rig. We need to do double tap the process, you might want to say. So we're going to convert this over to a editable polygon. We're going to put back on the skin wrap modifier. Where are you? Skin, no PQRS, skin wrap. Doink. Okay, and we're going to reselect what we just did. We're going to wait until our wrap pops up in the box. Time for a commercial, maybe not. Okay, deselect the ad. Okay, and I'm going to have to bring up manage the layers, and I'm going to bring up the player rig. We got kind of stuff sorted out here into individual layers. And to kind of make it easier to select the bone so I'm not drilling through geometry, we'll select limited to bone selection. Now, what we need to do now is dump the information that's on to our alpha character onto our player model. So it's easy enough to do. Just hit the skin, convert the skin, and delete the skin wrap modifier. Now we have a completely portable, ready to go into the game Unreal Engine 4 player model based on our character rigging that will accept our stock animation sets, as well as still maintain the UV mapping layout that is will be standard, the same for every other player model, and we certainly can sort of move things around now. As you can see, oops, ouch! You can see that we can obviously now select our bones here and move them and rotate them around. So that's kind of the direction. Oh boy, I mean the shading in this is pretty bad. I wonder if what happens if we pop it over to realistic. Yeah. Didn't take too kindly to that. Shade. Anyways, you can kind of see what it looks like in once it's rendered properly in the Unreal 4 engine. That's going to be the tail of the tail, of course, is the high-tech texturing that's now available. You know, it doesn't look like much now, but it will look like a zombie. Okay, so anyways, I think that should be hopefully informative enough as to design direction. To kind of summarize things, we want to look at secting out our player models. The idea is of our backstory, our game story. There is one in the works. That's still to be feathered out a little bit more. We want to add a little bit more flavoring to the game than just a bunch of players running around, and focus a little bit on secting out our player models into a little bit more flexible way as to allowing, hopefully in the future, that the players themselves can start to can get in there and actually, let's say in a controlled manner, be able to create their own player models that are unique to their own personality. I mean, if somebody wants a face full of metal, then who am I to argue against that?